Welcome, episode 5 of the Rhodes to Wealth podcast. Before I introduce today's guest, I do want to take a second to just give my thoughts and prayers in regards to any of the families and people that are dealing with this coronavirus or any of the ripples that could cause, whether it be financial or emotional stress. Yeah, there's some crazy things going on. I'm going to find some silver lining here in that I thought today I was going to be recording this on the road. I was supposed to be actually in Vancouver today, and that trip was canceled last minute. And so I'm actually sitting in my pajamas on the couch, recording the intros and outros for this. I've got some pour over coffee, and yeah, while I'm in a okay and comfortable spot, I know that there's a lot going on. So my condolences out there. If I can shift gears, I apologize for the start on a low mark there, but today's guest is Maura Thomas. And Maura has studied productivity and work-life balance for more than 2 decades now. She actually started her career by getting her BA and her MBA at UMass Amherst. She then goes on a rather bendy career roadmap that we'll discuss in the podcast, but finds herself at the end of this journey as the founder, head trainer, an author, a speaker of a company called Regain Your Time, and they're headquartered out of Austin, Texas. Maura is now widely cited as the authority figure on attention management. She's been named top leadership speaker for 2018 by Inc. magazine. She's a staple in business media, including regular contributions toward the Harvard Business Review. I'm extremely excited and honored to talk through just the empowerment and how to become empowered over our productivity with Maura Thomas.
It's the road to the wealth. I do it for health. For my kids and my spouse. Financially sound. You the bad dad.
And we're here. I'm going to start this a little different. Attention management is the single most important skill for true productivity. The ability to achieve your most significant results, to be the kind of person you want to be, and to live a life of choice rather than a life of reaction and distraction. Maura Thomas, I really, really appreciate you doing this. I expect this interview to be a bit of a wake-up call for me, and probably several others. I really, really appreciate you doing this.
I'm happy to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me.
I mentioned this offline, but I think it's worth noting, at least as we get started. I reached out because in my original role, or in my typical role, my 9 to 5, I'm in an outside sales role, which is I stay busy as far as prospecting and reaching out and prep time and running demos and traveling. And when I started this side hustle, if you will, or this podcast, this damn near feels like an outside sales role in that I'm having to prospect and reach out to clients and do a bunch of research on and gather questions and read your books. And there's a lot going on. And I feel personally, and I'm hoping, and as I read your book, I find it's not quite verbed this way, but personally, I feel I have a limited number of what I call cycles. Right? I've got a limited number of cycles that I can use in a day. And I'm spending cycles on this interview, right? I'm spending cycles and brainwaves on running demos and doing my research and everything that we just kind of ran through there. And when I'm done with my cycles, I'm done. And unfortunately, unless there's a power nap there where I can regenerate a couple cycles, when I hit the end of the day or when I hit my limit, I'm done, right? And so the skill of attention management and being able to really hone in on what I'm doing and where I'm headed seems more relevant and crucial now than ever before.
I agree. That's what I'm hearing from others as well. Attention management to me, as you quoted from the book, it's just our distraction is only going to get worse. And our biggest challenge to productivity, and how I define it, productivity is achieving our significant results. Actually, that's how the dictionary defines productivity, right? Our ability to achieve our most significant results, our biggest obstacle to that is distraction. And so if distraction is our biggest obstacle to productivity, then we need to stop phrasing it in terms of managing our time. And we need to shift our perspective, because the solution to a distraction problem is attention management, not time management.
Yeah. I guess I want to give you a swing at, and maybe that was it. Do you have a set definition or a typical stroke? I guess before I even go there, do you mind maybe walking us through just maybe your background on who you are and what you have going on today?
Sure. I've spent my entire professional career in the productivity training industry. I started right out of college with a company that sold paper-based planners and training to go along with them. And I had a really great methodology for productivity. But also my last role there was director of marketing, where I had to know everybody else's methodology for productivity at the time. Now, this was quite a while ago, but I read all the books and I went to all the trainings and I saw all the speakers. And then it was my job. The company was international and had offices in 43 countries around the world. So twice a year, I got to sit around a table with other people in 42 other countries who were studying productivity and what it takes to be productive. So I got an education in the field of personal productivity that I'm not sure how that anybody, other people could get that. I was really fortunate and blessed, and it really set the stage. I didn't know it at the time, but it set the stage for the whole rest of my life. And so when I left there, I started my business, and that was 2003. And as I continued my studies in productivity, and everybody kept phrasing when I was talking to people, and they would say, oh, so I would talk about productivity and they would say, oh, so you help people with time management. And I'd be like, oh, I understand that that's what everybody calls it, but I'm realizing that number one, we can't manage time. And number two, you're right, it marches on. No matter what we do, we can't stop it. We can't slow it down. We can't get more of it. We can't bend it to our will in any way. And when I ask people, what does it mean to you to manage time? In fact, I'll pose that question for real to you. In order to manage time, what do you physically do to manage time?
Yeah. And I'm going to say, after reading your book, I lack at this, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm very old school in that I block out my calendar to manage my time. Yeah, I block out my calendar with huge calendar chunks, and I'll label it, and I'll even maybe make them as private so people in my company can't go in and see what I'm doing at that time. But I'll put giant blocks on my calendar.
And don't get me wrong, especially when you share calendars with other people, protecting your calendar is super important. However, most people take all the stuff that they have to do, any sort of to-do list that they have, and they just make an appointment with themselves on their calendar, every opening on their calendar. Oh, I can do this at 2:00 and I can do this at 3:00. And it's completely random. And you don't know what kind of energy cycle you're going to be in, right? You don't know where your head's going to be. You don't know 3 days from now, right, what that day is going to look like. And so what I have found is that managing time means making appointments with yourself, but who's the first person you will break an appointment with?
Yeah, myself.
Exactly. So this idea, so number one, we can't manage time. And number two, when we try, we fail. So it just started to get annoying to me as I was studying productivity and thinking about this idea of time management that we've had for centuries, right? And realizing that time management is not the solution. And so then it just was so apparent to me, like, well, our problem is distraction. And so how do we solve a distraction problem? Attention is the antidote. And so we need to stop talking about managing time and instead managing attention. And so I think I wrote my first article. It still appears on my blog, I think, on the topic. I think it's dated July of 2009 or 2010. So it's been about a decade that I've been talking and writing about attention management. It's been a theme in all my books, but I was really excited this year to write what I consider to be sort of the book on attention management. Even though it's a quick read and has lots of actionable steps, it is enough to get people started on the path.
Yeah, I will echo. I mean, the book I mentioned right before we got on here, I read it in less than an hour, which gave me the opportunity to read it a few times before I jumped on here. And to your point, I mean, it's packed with information. And even more so, probably my favorite part is after you consume all this information from, the first chapter, the second chapter, at the end of the chapter, you tuck in 5 or 6 actionable items you can take into the real world and start to use and leverage and really start to tune yourself, right? Giving us some homework, which I really appreciate and I love. I think it goes without saying, but this podcast is going to take a little different. It's going to take it's not the typical production or podcast that I run, in that we're not going to spend an hour talking about financial mat talk. We're not going to be dying. That's my Cheer reference. We just finished Cheer on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it, but yeah. So we're not going to spend an hour talking about digging into the weeds of the finances. I will quickly mention, just for the super dollars and cents nerds that I've got. You're a big fan of Garrett Gunderson with the Wealth Factory. I'm currently in his entry level class. I'm working to pull him on the podcast. We actually shared an email right before I jumped on here. So I'm trying to have him on, and obviously that'd be a great honor. But today I'm going to be spending most of the time trying to capitalize on the 25 years of attention management experience that you have. If I could continue, I think this is something that everyone struggles with, a subject that everyone struggles with. And as you run through what most people do, I feel you've gone into my calendar and into my life, and you just see what I do. I'm smiling because I feel you're talking directly to me and how I live my life, but or at least how I work through my 9 to 5. I think this is something, and the reason I was open to at least publishing this is, furthermore, I mean, while it's important to manage your attention, if you're set on really accomplishing something, and let's call it building wealth, you need to be able to control your attention, and you need to be able to control your emotions. And hopefully with both of those under control, you're able to control your actions, right? And be more productive. So while we're not going to spend the next 40 minutes talking about the dollars and cents, I would say this is a core component, a foundational element in building wealth, is being able to manage that attention.
Absolutely, because how you manage your time only matters to the extent that you also devote your attention, right? So if you and I were having this conversation and I had my phone in my hand and I was also scrolling through my email, it would be a very different experience for both of us, right? So I managed my time by getting on this call at the appointed time, but I wasn't present, right? And so the fact that I managed my time didn't matter. What you wanted from me was my attention. And what we want from other people when we are with them is their attention. And so you can devote time all day long to getting smart about your money. But if you're not present, if you're not focused, if our constant distraction is chipping away at your attention span, like it is for most of us, you're going to read one page of that financial book and then just be like, wait, I got to go check my email. I need to do something else, because we're so used to being constantly distracted. So it is, to me, attention management is really the secret of everything. Controlling your attention is the key.
Yeah. You kind of walked us through how we've gotten to this point, really how attention management came to be. You have a really interesting background in that. I mean, you go from director of marketing, climate change messenger, president, CEO, board member of several foundations and organizations. You kind of talked us through that journey, but I can't help myself. It's something just from the entrepreneurial aspect, I'm curious. And when you decided to move on your own, was that self-funded? Did you have any mentorships or mastermind groups that you were leaning on? That's a big leap, right? And obviously you had the chance to sort of fine tune attention management. So I'm assuming that you were very structured and you kind of knew where you were going and how you were going to get there. But jumping in with 2 feet is always difficult, right? And so did you have someone there to sort of guide you, or a group, some sort of mastermind? Kind of help me understand just what encouraged you or used as guidance there.
Sure. I don't remember if I learned of the book and then created the masterminds, or if I created the mastermind and then naturally gravitated toward the book. But the book is Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. And as far as I know, that's sort of the book that introduces the whole masterminding concept. I've always been a super social person. I've always been kind of a joiner. I like groups and I like to be around people who are doing stuff that I'm doing. And so I have always formed my own mastermind groups. And maybe before I read the book, I didn't realize that that's what they were. But yes, I've been members of informal groups. I've been members of formal groups, often multiple. I think I'm in 4 different mastermind groups as we speak. But yes, I definitely think that input from others, I can't say that I had one mentor in the business, but for sure, having input from others. And I'll have to give a shout out to the National Speakers Association, which probably one of my biggest mistakes in business was that I waited too long to join. I've really only been a member for a few years, but wow, it's been really transformational for me in the people that I've met and the resources that I've become exposed to. And it's really for anyone it's called the National Speakers Association, and certainly people who go on stage and do keynotes and speakers, it's absolutely critical for those. But really, NSA is useful for anyone who is working to make a living from their knowledge, from their expertise, right? If you're using your knowledge and your experience, the kind that only you can offer, by the way. I mean, there are lots of people who know stuff about sales and about financial freedom, but nobody's going to explain it the way you explain it, right? And if you are looking to use that knowledge either for publicity or for profit, then the National Speakers Association is the place to be, because it's about monetizing your knowledge. But there was one other thing that I wanted to say about the mastermind concept, being around other professionals. Oh, and you asked me if I self-funded. This is what I want to say. I got started because I had a job that I hated and I knew that I needed to quit. And it got so bad that I finally decided I would rather live in my car than have this job for one more day. But really how I got started was I took an inventory of my skills and I thought about what skills do I have that people will pay for. And I knew that I didn't want to have a boss. I knew that I wanted to be my own boss. And so I started down the road just sort of monetizing the skills I had, offering the skills that I had to other people who didn't have them, which happened to be other small business owners. And then I took some twists and turns and realized that the most unique skill that I had was this wealth of productivity knowledge. And so I started to refine from there. And yes, but to answer your question, I lived on credit cards for at least 3 years.
Sure, yeah. And I wasn't planning on going here, but I didn't know that was the sort of getting started, how this came to be. And it's bringing me back to I had an interview it's probably a month ago now with Brian Dixon, and one of his sort of takeaways or homeworks that he gave us, it's his book Start With Your People, is do this self-assessment. And you create this anonymous, like 3 questionnaire, right? 3 questions, and you send it out this anonymous. He gave us a software to use, but you could probably do it with some sort of Excel doc. You share this anonymously with, he named it 30 or 50 people, sort of your network, friends, family, colleagues, maybe people you've done business with in the past. And in these questions, you're asking them, where have I struggled? Where have I failed you? Where have I succeeded? What are my strengths? And you're asking them some questions about trying to get honest feedback and where can I improve and what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I'm going to ask you the same. You mentioned you did some self-reflection. You found this is my strong suit, and then you went to market with that. Do you mind? Was that self-reflection? Did you find that yourself? Did you go out to people and ask, hey, where am I being successful, or why do you enjoy working with me? What do you see in me? Were you asking others?
I didn't. It was trial and error, because in my early days of entrepreneurship, I was selling a variety of different offerings, a variety of different skill sets that I had. And it just became, as I had new clients and I was talking to people and sort of offering the skill sets, it was always like, wait, what's that? How do you know? How do you know that? How do you do that thing that you do? And it was always around productivity and effectiveness. And so that sort of clued me in.
Yeah, you went to the market with something, and then the customers kind of guided you to what they really needed. And from there, you just tuned that up.
Yes.
Beautiful. I'm going to make a shift here to sort of our primary topic of attention management. We've danced around, used the lingo a bit, Do you have a true definition of attention management? And we talked about this a little bit early on, but since we're pivoting to the topic, maybe talking a bit about how attention management differs from time management.
Yeah. So the kind of technical definition that I operate from is that attention management is the ability to recognize different brain states, to recognize the brain state that you're in, and shift to a more effective brain state that will serve you given the moment that you're in. But really, my definition of attention management is a little bit like the definition of healthy living. It's pretty broad, right? There's so many things that you can do. Attention management encompasses certainly focus and concentration, but also mindfulness and presence, and meditation can be a component of attention management, but it's all of those things that get you in touch with sort of your own headspace and your ability to be in a moment and to marshal the full range of your resources in the service of that moment. And I call that unleashing your genius in the book. Right? Not only the full range of your knowledge and skills and wisdom and abilities, but also all those other things I said, right? Nobody's going to talk about your expertise the way you talk about your expertise. And so it's the humor that you bring and the compassion and the energy and the kindness and the empathy and, right, all of that stuff that makes you you. I feel like all of your listeners have amazing, unique gifts to bring to the world, and they are shortchanging the world when they are only bringing a tiny sliver of their genius, because distraction is undermining their ability to share themselves fully with the world.
Do you find that there's a specific type of person or team or region or demographic or vertical within a company? Do you find that there's anyone or company in particular that struggles more or does better with attention management? I mean, obviously there's a spectrum here. Who struggles with this the most, and maybe who succeeds at this?
Yeah, I think that there is a type of person who struggles with this, and that type of person does tend to gravitate toward specific industries. So the type of person I think who struggles with this or maybe not even struggles with this, but the type of person who doesn't want this are the people who believe, I think because they've been misinformed for a really long time, but this whole sort of multitasking, I can sleep when I'm dead, I've got a million things going on and I love it, and that's how I succeed, and that's what's contributed to my success, and don't tell me that that's not good for me because this is how I've made it, right? And absolutely, there are times when you need to be in what I call the reactive and distracted quadrant. For sure. And some industries are better suited to that than others. I had a discussion with a guy not that long ago who was in one of my workshops. And he was like, I'm not sure about this, because look at somebody like a fighter pilot, right? They are so distracted when they're flying. They've got a million pieces of information that they need to take in, and they've got a ton of stuff going on, and they have to be on it. And I was like, I wouldn't call a fighter pilot distracted. I would call them absolutely in high intensity focus flow, right? Yes, they are absorbing multiple pieces of information, but it is all in the service of flying the plane. And so that doesn't count. That's not multitasking. That is doing all the things that are required to do one thing, right? But those people who feel like, distraction is their friend and multitasking is their friend, and they sort of, they're a little bit of adrenaline junkies, right?
Yeah.
Those are the people who probably are not the market for my book, right? And those are the people who I would never try to convince that they should stop doing what they're doing, because if it's working for you, that's great. But then you ask me about the industry, I will say that there seems to be a disproportionately high number of people like that in sales.
Yeah. I know.
And you know what? If that has contributed to your success and that's what works for you, and this message doesn't resonate for you, more power to you. Go for it.
Sure. It's funny because I would say I fit that bucket, but I would say the impact it had on me as I read through it, even probably more so the second time now that I was really digging into the content. But I would say it had the opposite effect in that I'm going to use the layman's term of I'm very scatterbrained. I'm all over the place, and I'll work at the 9 to 5 job. I'll take a demo. The next hour I'm doing Rhodes to Wealth. The next hour I'm doing this, and it's all over the place and I'm blocked out. And I close the book and then I think about if I was batch processing this, if I was batch processing and I did Rhodes to Wealth on Tuesdays and I just focused in and I gave all my attention and efforts and time to this and I had a game plan, would I be more effective? Or is me shutting my sales brain off, turning my podcast brain on, turning this off, me every hour, is that benefiting me? And I would say the answer is no. I'm probably doing more harm than I am good. You've mentioned the graph a couple times. We've talked about some of the lingo you use there. I want to break that down really quickly. You give a fantastic graphic or image in the book, this sort of quadrant, right? This quadrant, and you label each quadrant. On the x-axis, it's the amount of attention required, I believe. And then on the y-axis, it's the level of control that you have in that time. Actually, I've got a quote from your book. You've mastered control over your attention when you routinely recognize which quadrant you're in and make the appropriate changes. So maybe let's talk a bit about the 4 quadrants, if we can, and kind of what lies in them.
Sure. Yeah, the 4 quadrants of attention management. I mean, it's just a model. It's a representative. They would call it a contextual model, right? Just to sort of course, there are many different brain states, but if we could sort of group them loosely, and I'm not a psychologist, right? But I have confirmed with psychologists that I am not lying to anybody. my conclusions are valid. But yeah, as you said, on the x-axis, it's how much attention do you get as a result of the y-axis, how much effort or control you're putting in. And so if we think about no effort, no control, and really no attention, that is the quadrant of reactive and distracted. And that's where, unfortunately, most people spend their days. Most people go to work and do whatever happens to them, right? They're just sort of doing the best they can to sort of catch all the balls that are being thrown at them and just reacting to all of it. But then sadly driving home at night thinking, man, I was busy all day and I didn't get anything done. And now, as I said, there are times when that state of mind is helpful, right? You go, let's say you're a manager, you go out into the sort of bullpen of your office and you're like, all right, what do you got for me, people? How can I help? What do you need, right? Exactly.
Everything's coming in.
Yeah. I'm here for you. Bring it to me, right? That's a great time for that mindset. And depending on your role, right, you might have more of that than others, right? An office manager, for example, might be in that situation often, somebody who supports multiple people, a sales administrator, right? And that's great. So it's not that any quadrant is bad or good. It's just the amount of time that you spend in each quadrant and the kind of results that you get as a result. So reactive and distracted, no control, no attention, or low control, low attention. Then if we think about low attention, but high control, I call this, which might seem counterintuitive at first, but stay with me. I call this the daydreaming or the mind wandering quadrant. Low attention, because you're not focusing on anything in particular, but also high control. And here's why I think we need high control in order to daydream. It's because daydreaming used to happen a lot more often for us because it happened in what I call the in-between moments, right? It happened when we were walking across the parking lot. It happened when we were riding an elevator. It happened when we were waiting in line, stopped at a stoplight, right? All of those opportunities we had for our mind to wander and take in the scenery and process what has happened to us during that day, evaluate the information that we've consumed, and use it and apply it in other ways to have strategic insights and creativity. But the problem is that those moments have disappeared because now in any pause of activity, we are conditioned to whip out our device. And so it takes a lot of control, a lot of effort to be still, to not pull out your device, to just recognize that being is productive and important for your brain. So that's the daydreaming, mind wandering quadrant. Low attention, because nothing in particular, you're just sort of letting your brain see where it goes. But high control, because if you don't try really hard, you're never going to have those moments.
Yeah. Those moments are becoming, I mean, you said it, less and less frequent. So at one point you could get that on a walk or in the elevator. Time travels. I'm sure at one point you could only get that on an airplane. You know, there's no Wi-Fi, but now they've got TVs and Wi-Fi and things in your face and headphones. And I mean, there's something constantly able to distract you if you allow it to. Right? So that's becoming more and more difficult.
Absolutely. I was having lunch with a friend the other day, and it's a friend that I love dearly and I don't get to see very often. And we were in this restaurant, and on every wall of the restaurant was a TV. And on every TV was a different channel. And the TV directly in front of me was running like, it was like the Puppy Channel or something. It was like adorable little baby animals directly above my friend's head. And I was struggling so hard to stay present in that conversation. He was the most important thing. He was the thing that I was there for. And yet it was so hard. And he had the same thing behind my head. And it was just such a challenge. And I don't know why the restaurant does this. I think it's because people want that kind of stimulation. We've become conditioned to it. But then we go to a restaurant like that and it just reinforces the conditioning. So it was hard. But yeah, to your point, there's distractions all the time.
You talked a bit about the reactive and distracted phase. You talked about daydreaming. I want to spend maybe just a cycle here on flow state.
Yeah.
Can you maybe unpack that just for a second or two here?
Sure. Let me back up and talk about the third quadrant first, because it leads to the fourth one, which is flow. So the third quadrant is what I call focused and mindful. And this is high control, high attention, right? This is when you are saying, I am doing this, right? That was me the other day saying, I am here with Steve for lunch. This is what we're doing. This is what we're talking about. I am working really hard to stay present despite all the distractions and to really hear him and to give him my full attention. Focused and mindful. Now, when we stay focused and mindful and other conditions are right, and I can talk about what those conditions are, but when the conditions are right, we might get lucky enough to tip into flow state. And I say that because while focused and mindful is a conscious effort, flow is more unconscious. Flow is something that your brain does all by itself, right? You can't will yourself into flow state. You can't just say, I'm now in flow, right? It doesn't work that way. When you stay focused and mindful for an extended period of time and other conditions are right, then the part of your brain that recognizes you in time and space, the part of your brain that says, it's kind of cold in here. Is it almost lunchtime? What time is it? I'm sort of thirsty, right? The part of your brain that gives you all those messages disconnects. And you go into this place of full and total immersion in what they experience in the moment, in the task. And that's flow. But the problem is that there is no flow in the presence of distraction. And most of us are not in an environment with no distraction ever. And so we rarely ever get into flow state.
Yeah. I would argue that everyone has at least felt or witnessed that flow state at least once. And as I hear you talk about it, I start smiling just because the feeling you get post flow state, right? And you can hit it, and I've hit it in prospecting. I've hit it in research. You hit it in times where you've got to use some mental activity. It's keeping you engaged, but it's not overexerting you, right? And so and then you get out the other side of it. It almost is if I could draw like a comparison, it kind of reminds me of like a runner's high in the professionals world, if you will. I mean, you get in it, you can't just enter runner's high, right? I put on my shoes, I walk outside and I take off and I'm there. I've got to put on my shoes. I've got to get outside. It's got to be a somewhat okay day. I take off running there a couple miles in. If I've pushed through a couple limits and I've got good music in, all of a sudden the running becomes easy.
Yeah.
And you're just an autopilot and you run the next few miles or you complete the rest of your work in the professional world with its effort, but somehow it's less effort because you've entered this autopilot muscle memory stage and everything becomes easier and powerful. It's a really unique, I guess, quadrant to kind of explore.
It's effort that feels effortless. And in athletics, they all often call it the zone, right? An athlete, a runner gets in the zone, right? And that's pretty much what it is. It's like suddenly you're not thinking anymore about how much your lungs hurt and how much your thighs are burning. Or is that just me? But for some people, I've heard that feeling goes away and you can enter flow with running. I've never had that experience with running, but I think runner's high is a thing that runners tell other people just to bring the rest of us into your misery.
Yeah, just to make it popular. Yeah, just fair. Yeah. So I know you spend, let's call it all day. I mean, your time working with teams and clients on a daily basis, right? So I'm curious as to where most people or clients fall, and understanding that throughout the day be very fluid within these quadrants, right? And at times, maybe early in the morning, you're super focused and you're maybe even in flow. And then there after lunch, you get exhausted and you come back and you feel overwhelmed and you're very reactive. Do you find that people sort of sit and marinate in a specific quadrant, maybe more than the rest? Is there one that we shouldn't be in too often? I mean, is there a bad portion of this?
Well, I mean, it's not the state itself, it's just the circumstance, right? So if you're in a reactive and distracted state, but what would serve you in that moment is focused and mindful, then that's not, I won't call it bad, but that's not optimal, obviously, right? I think the problem, and this is where sort of the heart of attention management, the problem is that we don't recognize what brain state we're in. And so most people, because of all the incoming stimulus, we are reactive and distracted all day long, but we don't think about, man, this is killing me. I got to get some stuff done here. And I can't even, right? I think we feel frustrated and we feel frazzled and we feel stressed and we feel like I can't even hold a thought in my head for a minute, but we don't often get the idea to say, let me just take a minute. We maybe unconsciously feel that way. And it's like, whoa, I need a cup of coffee, right? Or I need a break. And we'll sort of pick up our phone and scroll through Facebook or something. The problem is because we aren't really doing that intentionally, we don't really give ourselves a break. Because if you just spent the last hour like reading emails and talking to people and answering the phone and doing all of that kind of stuff that uses a certain part of your brain, and then on your break, then you go read Facebook or sports scores, it's really still the same sort of mental engagement. So you're not getting any kind of break, really. And so the key to attention management is, when, like the quote that you read from the book, when you are skilled in attention management, you begin to make intentional choices and ask yourself, where am I? And is this brain state serving me? Or do I need to shift? And how do I shift?
You are, almost like I gave you the script here. Perfect segue into where I'm headed. As far as the typical engagement with a client, you come in and they are super frazzled. You're speaking to my heart. We're looking at emails and push notifications, and you've got an open floor concept in your office. And so your boss and colleagues and engineers and people are coming over and talking to you, and everybody's got it to do for you. When you come into an organization, or if I can make it more personable, you come in and you sit down and you do some sort of coaching one-on-one session with somebody. You work, no coaching. Just the people.
So rather than I'm really not a coach. I'm a trainer and a speaker. So my interactions with audiences, in fact, I usually tell my clients who hire me to train their teams, let's move off site. Let's go somewhere else. Let's get a conference room somewhere else, or at least away from people's desks, so that they can be very present in the training, which is very sort of interactive and very engaging. But let's be present in the experience of the training and then get everybody started so that they can hit the ground running when they get back to their desk.
Sure. Got it. So maybe as to the masses, but just talking to Josh now, what is the getting started point?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because there is an assessment on my website at maurathomas.com/assessment, where people can go to evaluate their own attention management skills and get some ideas of where they are, and then as a result of where they are, what they should do next. So training is a different experience than sort of a coaching situation. But a lot of it is awareness, right? Because distraction for most of us is a habit, right? And it's a habit that we don't recognize, right? Most of us get distracted every few minutes all day long. And so distraction becomes a habit, right? You become accustomed to expecting a distraction every few minutes. And right. And so it's a distraction it's a habit that gets reinforced every few minutes all day long. And we just sort of, without somebody shining a light saying, hold on, I know your office is loud. I know you have a million things going on, but you can control this. You can exert more control. You can become empowered over your ability to manage your life instead of just always doing what happens to you. And so recognizing your habit of distraction is the first step. And I give some exercises in the book about how to recognize your habit of distraction and then how to overcome those habits. And so that's a really good starting point.
Beautiful. You give several strategies in the book on how to actually reduce outside noise, right? How to prime yourself to get into flow state. I'd like to talk myself and maybe the listeners through some of those. I've got a few written down if needed, but I definitely want to open the floor to, do you have any sort of favorite or powerful steps that you look to implement with teams? Control your technology, control the environment. Do you have any favorites that maybe you lean on more or you go towards that are sort of your star pieces there that we could talk through?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's sort of every step builds on, it's a cumulative, right? So first step is awareness. What is my distraction habit? How bad is it serving me? Could I improve my productivity? In other words, could I achieve more of my significant results if I operated differently? So then once you know that, then there are 3 buckets that distraction falls in. We have distractions from other people, distractions from our technology, and distractions from ourselves in our own head, right? We distract ourselves probably more than anybody else. So deconstructing those and tackling each one at a time is kind of the next step. So, for example, controlling your environment. So you work in an open office and it's loud and it's noisy and it's distracting. What can you do about it? Well, is there a conference room that you can go to for an hour a couple of times a day? Or can you put up a sign on your desk that says, please do not disturb? Sometimes. You can't do that all day, every day. But can you do it for like an hour a few times a day, or 15 minutes every hour? The frequency and the duration is totally up to you. But the point is, you need to give your colleagues that signal that says, please don't right now. Please don't. And I'm happy to help you, but just not right now.
Yeah, you give the example of headphones in the book. Throw in some headphones, and I've probably overly used headphones to where it's almost become calloused in the office, right? And people stop by in front of you and wave, like, "Hey, I see you've got headphones in," and so I'm probably wearing them too much. To your point, you need to be able to pull them out and say, "Hey, this is team time," and then put it back in and say, "This is Josh time again."
That's right. If anything that you use all the time loses its effectiveness, right? That doesn't mean that he doesn't want to be disturbed. That's just what he does all the time. So, right. So you have to pick your signals, and then you have to be clear with your signals and diligent with your signals about when you don't want to be disturbed, for sure.
Reducing the technology piece, understanding notifications and alerts. I think there are some really easy ones. Shut off all non-critical notifications, or maybe even more so, just shut the damn phone off, right? Turn off your notifications. Unfortunately, I'm going to ask the millennial question, in that, are there any applications or softwares or tips or anything else that you try to plug in here as far as controlling your technology?
Yeah, there are some pieces of software and apps and things that if you really can't do it on your own, they can help you. Things like Rescue Time and Freedom, I think, is another one, and some of those. But really, I feel like we shouldn't need those. We should be able to control our own technology. But here's the thing: if we don't, then technology runs our life, because there's never going to be a time when something's not happening on your phone. If you don't shut off those push notifications, if you have any apps loaded at all, and you don't shut off those push notifications, if you have any other people in your life who call you or text you, If you get emails on your phone, right? All these things that we use our phone for, there will never be a time when that stops. You have to make that. You have to make that. Otherwise, you live at the mercy of your technology. And I don't think any of us walked into the local store, technology store, electronics store, and plopped down our, $1,000 and said, "Here's my money, so everyone in the world can interrupt me all the time." Right?
That's right.
That's not what we intend. Yeah. And yet that's how we behave.
Yeah. I know we're getting tight on time. I've got a couple more here. One of my favorite bullets that you brought up, or favorite sort of tips or advice that you bring, and I mentioned it earlier, is seek depth. It's probably my favorite piece you brought up. It's toward the end of the book. Our impatience and this constant distraction and like, we've got to go, causes us to cut corners and take in and consume the summary or the Spark Notes version of books and articles and blogs and ideas and topics. And we're always just skimming the top. And you make the point in the book of not only are you missing out on memories and stories and obviously knowledge, but you're missing a chance to build a kind of, you call it rich expertise and within your realm or within your industry that can give you an edge in your career. The idea of seek depth really stood out to me. Is there anything that I missed there? And if not, totally okay. But is there anything I missed there that's maybe worth elaborating on a bit?
I just think that life is nuanced, right? We can't live life in sound bites as much as we would maybe like to. I think sound bites are useful techniques for communicating tiny bites of information, but we have to recognize that the tiny bite is not the whole thing. It's not the whole story, right? Life is nuanced. Every single situation is nuanced. I think this is part of our problem with politics is that, you can't solve global poverty with a bumper sticker, right?
Yeah, right.
These problems are hard and they require depth and nuance and presence in order to really have that rich experience, that rich expertise.
Yeah. I guess to double down, I mean, you use the politic example, and I don't want to jump into politics, but I find when we have like the national debates, I think it's a very similar thing. They each get like 2 minutes to dive into a topic and you just kind of skim the surface. And how do we know anything that they're talking about or what they're doing or their belief systems if they have, 90 seconds and then they're cut off hard? You can't do anything in that amount of time. I'm going to double down. You mentioned real early on sort of the how to create flow state. And just like the runner's high, you can't just flip the switch, but you can sort of prime yourself for it and make sure the environment and everything around you is accepting the flow state. You with, 20 plus years of experience, you can't flip that switch, but I'm assuming you're pretty damn close. Do you mind sharing, what does your environment look like? And what's the perfect sort of environmental flow state, if that question makes sense?
Yeah. And I have to give credit. I said, again, I'm not a psychologist, but the people that I have learned from are Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's the author of the book called Flow. He is the Hungarian-American psychologist who documented flow as a true state. It is our brain operates differently when we are in flow than when we aren't. So I've learned a lot from him, and also from Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book called Focus, the Hidden Driver of Excellence. They both, Daniel does a lot of work picking up on Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow. And what I've learned from them is that the conditions for flow, and actually they don't talk about eliminating distractions as a component of flow, but in my experience with my clients, it's, there's no flow in the presence of distraction. So that is one. But according to them, the other conditions for flow are that the task ahead of you needs to be sufficiently challenging to keep you engaged, because if it's too easy, you'll get bored and you won't get into flow. But it can't be beyond your capabilities, because then you'll get frustrated and you won't get into flow. But if you think about it, for most of us, the highest and best purpose of our jobs, the thing that we were truly hired to do, right? If you're in sales, you were probably hired because of your ability to create relationships with people and to help them solve their problems, right? And so that probably requires a fair bit of effort on your part. It requires your presence. It requires your research. It requires you to be fully engaged in that. But it's also not beyond your capabilities. It's probably when you are operating at your best, it's probably the thing that comes really naturally to you. So that's sort of the sweet spot. So those are the three conditions. And I'm sure psychologists could explain a million more. But for us lay people, right? No distractions, sufficiently challenging, but not beyond your capabilities.
That's awesome. I have a couple comments, but I know we're running tight on time, tighter. I had one more topic that I wanted to dive into, and I'll make it brief. But one of the biggest struggles I have is, I guess, let me read your piece first, then I'll talk to you about it. One of the favorite pieces another one of my favorite pieces from your book is this simple breakdown about getting out of your own head and getting everything from your head into some sort of consolidated platform, piece, paper, whatever it is. I'm going to read this piece from your book if you're okay with that. I know I've stolen a few quotes. The solution comes down to 3 truths. 1, you can only manage what you see. 2, you can only see what's outside your head. And 3, you need things in one centralized external location that you can trust and that you can refer to at any time. This is alluding, and I mentioned this as I got started, this is alluding to the fact that most of us, and I'm the world's worst at this, try to operate from either I've got like a notepad that's got a to-do list on it, or I'm working out of the old noggin, right? And blocking off the calendar, which is brutal. And I've tried a few different platforms, some of which, I've tried carrying around a notebook. I've tried a software. I think the point you're making here of get it out of your head and on a piece of paper is super valid. And I'm sure everybody knows this, but we don't do it, right? So I'm interested in, what do you use? Are you physical notebook? Are you a software? Do you use OneNote or Evernote or something of that nature? What do you use to brain dump? And I'm even more interested, if you're okay with maybe talking a bit about organization.
Yeah. So the premise of your question is the exact mistake that most people I talk to make. And here's the thing. If you bought the same set of golf clubs that your favorite pro golfer, plays golf with, does that make you a golf pro?
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not.
Right? And yet we think that some magic software or planner is going to make us a productivity pro, right? It's not the tool. It's what I call the methodology. And the methodology is the collection of habits that you have that you apply to a tool, sure, a set of tools, absolutely. But without the habits, without the methodology, then the tool doesn't matter, right? And it goes beyond the technical know-how of the tool, right? Because people say, well, I just downloaded this app and I opened the app and I know how to use it. I create a new task. I do this. I put a reminder. I get it. Makes perfect sense, right? Well, that would be like saying, I have great clubs. I have the same clubs that pro golfer plays clubs with. And guess what? I know how to use the clubs. I know that you hold the leather end and you swing the middle end.
Yeah, right.
Right? Now I should be a golf pro.
Yeah.
And I'm not. Right? So to me, it's in productivity, we call it a workflow management system. And I teach a workflow management system called the Empowered Productivity System. And that is the methodology that is outlined in my first book called Personal Productivity Secrets. Attention management, for sure, is a foundational component of workflow management, but it's only one. And the other one that you're talking about is what I call action management, right? It's what are the behaviors that I have that allow me to stay on top of all the things that I need to do in all parts of my life to keep it running smoothly. And action management is the secret to that. And there are some resources that that attention management book points you to for workflow management.
You mentioned the productivity management portion. You've got a class that you offer that's more focused, or a training that's more focused towards that. What was the name of that training again? I'm sorry.
It's a book.
It's a book. Your first book.
Yeah. My first book is called Personal Productivity Secrets. But for sure, in my trainings, I teach my clients the whole Empowered Productivity System, or whatever parts are relevant for them.
Got it. I think as I close, I maybe open the floor one last time, just productivity or attention management, hacks, thoughts. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that's maybe worth throwing out a couple blanket statements around or closing on?
My real desire with this latest book, and part of the reason why I went with this publisher to do this really compact, quick read, easily consumable, sort of joyful to read. It's very tactile. It's got thick pages. It's got lots of colors. The reason that I did it in this way is because my goal with the book was really to empower people to recognize that you can take control of your life, no matter how much technology there is, no matter how the world is conspiring to steal your attention, and it is, and it will only get worse. All that, you can still empower yourself to live a life of choice rather than a life of reaction and distraction. It is in your hands.
Yeah, I'm going to close on that. That's beautiful. I really, really appreciate your time. I said it out of the gate. This is going to be an eye-opening experience for me, or an interview for me. Exceeded all expectations. I really, really appreciate the time, the energy, the attention. For the folks that maybe want to find you, follow you, connect with you, grab your content, anything of that nature, what's the best way to get a hold of you and follow you?
Yeah, everything you need is on some page of maurathomas.com. But that assessment at maurathomas.com/assessment is a really great place to get started.
Beautiful. Yeah. I will, as always, have all links, including to the assessment and to your website, in the show notes. I'll also include the most recent, but all 3 books, right? The most recent being Attention Management, How to Create Success and Gain Productivity Every Day, followed by Work Without Walls, which I believe is meant more for leadership. And then finally, the book you mentioned, and I'm going to maybe drop a tidbit here. I think you're working on a rewrite of Personal Productivity Secrets.
Oh, you let the cat out of the bag. I am. But yeah, the original book is a great resource.
Yeah, absolutely. All of which can be found on Amazon. I got mine on Amazon. All the links will be in the description. As always, for the listeners, the folks that have tuned in, I'm open to comments, suggestions. Keep submitting questions at info@rhodestowealth.com. If nothing else, stay on your grind.
So as I wrap up here, I want to reiterate the point that I made at the top of the podcast. This podcast was not number or just finance focused. I'm a firm believer, after doing some research and studying and reading and talking to these other successful folks, that how you spend your time and your attention, and I call it in the podcast, how you spend your cycles, the inputs is going to absolutely determine the outputs, right? And so I think it's extremely important here early on in our journey just to become hyper-focused and hyper-aware of the distractions in our life. She closed with, you can live a life of choice rather than a life of reaction. And that's something that I jotted down. I've now got it on the mirror here. And I think there's a lot that we can pull from this. I really appreciate the patience. I don't think I mentioned this at the top of the call, but when I recorded this, I was sick as a dog. Maura was flexible with me in that we were able to push it to the end of the week, and she gave me a few days to recover. She's extremely busy. She's got a lot of travel going on. And so I didn't want to push this too long and risk not being able to get it. And so I appreciate her flexibility, even more so your flexibility in you tuning in while I was just stopped up to an extreme level. As always, any feedback, comments, concerns, questions, please reach out, info@rhodestowealth.com. Again, if this has sparked any interest, if we need to double down on the topic, if you have any questions for Maura, please reach out. I'm happy to field those as well. Until next week, hope you all have a great week. Stay on that grind.
So smooth, you know what I'm saying? Q1 made the beat, by the way, just to let y'all know what's going on. Tell them, it's the road to the wealth, yeah. I do it for health, yeah. It's the road to the wealth, yeah. With my kids and my spouse, yeah. It's the road to the wealth. I do it for health, yeah. My kids and my spouse, yeah. I'm financially sound, it's the road to the wealth, yeah. I do it for health, yeah. For my kids and my spouse, yeah. Financially sound, you the bad dad. If life about purpose, it give you something to seek in. I've been setting cash goals, financially speaking. I've been finding blessings through all of these demons. I pray to God, I give you something to reach with. See, I give you something to leave with. This life about goals and achievements. Your eyes on the prize, the hate out your mind, and pray to whatever beliefs in. Teach on the way, know that the beach on the way gotta shine hard, and the teacher's water, know that little seed, they gon' grow tomorrow. So every day gotta come with us. Shit. So they give you something to stand on, make the false off when you land raw. Make you put some new friends on. It's the road to the wealth. I do it for health, yeah. For my kids and my spouse, yeah. I'm financially sound, bad dad. It's the road to the wealth, yeah. I do it for health, yeah. For my kids and my spouse, yeah. I'm financially sound, you the bad dad.